Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May meeting of the Policy Committee for Cincinnati Public Schools. We'll go around and do a quick round of introductions, maybe starting with Rob.
Rob Wilson, technician.
Michael Gustin, Assistant Treasurer.
Mary Weinberg, Board Member on Policy.
Ben Lee, Board Member.
Kendra Matt, Board Member.
Dan Hoyne, General Counsel.
Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel. We have our student guest. Just say your name.
Zion.
Welcome, Kai. Welcome, Zion. Glad you're here. Happy summer vacation. That's great. Welcome. So I think for our agenda today, we have kind of a mix of things. We have some continued discussion, some new items, some work that's coming over from the Finance Committee. For area number 5, I think we should chat through these and make a plan for them today. What we did at the beginning of the year was invite any board member to submit any topic they'd like the policy committee to take up during the first 6 months of 2025. We're almost through that first 6 months period, and we got through the first list. So this is not a let's solve all these issues today, but let's make a plan for how we want to work through them over the next 6 months. And then we'll have some hearing of the public at the end and some times for other business. Wonderful. So I think with that, we'll turn it over to Council's office for item 2.
Morning. So item 2, the first item is a new law that was signed into law shortly after the new year called Ohio House Bill 8, the Parents' Bill of Rights bill. It requires all school districts in Ohio to put in place policy that has very specific parameters, very specific requirements, and it requires that policy be in place by July 1. We've drafted a policy that is almost verbatim kind of what is required by the statute, nothing more, nothing less. We've done a little bit of training with social workers, counselors, school social workers, about what's coming on this bill. Yeah. School psychologists. That's great. And so welcome your questions. I will say that the proposed policy is, again, really similar or verbatim kind of what's required or needed according to the statute. We welcome your questions about it.
Thanks, Dan. Stephanie, did you have more you wanted to add there? No? Board members' questions? I appreciated the conversation we had about this last time. We don't need to go Kendra, did you have anything that you wanted to ask about?
Just wanted to inquire. So you said almost verbatim. Is there any area that we would need to call out that maybe isn't, that wasn't the same as kind of the other drafts that was shared?
It's all very, very, kind of taking the statute and just organizing it in a way that makes a little more sense for a policy.
Okay.
I'm happy to do like a kind of 1 minute just summary of the sections if you want to. I don't know if that will be helpful.
I feel like you did a nice job of that last time. I do think it will be helpful at the board meeting where we present this. And I'm happy to be supportive on that front where I can be, but I think you all are so much closer to the content that the walkthrough from you would be great.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to make sure when you said almost verbatim, so just wanted to inquire. But I'm pretty familiar with it. We've had lengthy discussion about it, so I am okay with what you're presenting today.
Thanks. Just noting the kind of 2 flashpoints about again, with the sexuality content, in terms of how the district educates students on sex ed. I don't think this is any change. We already inform parents ahead of time, this lesson is coming, etc. And already give parents an opportunity to opt out of those lessons. However, I think the flashpoint could be how the state ultimately defines what sexuality content includes. And they may take a broader view of this than just sex education. The second piece, that's the flashpoint, I think. Again, most of this is just common practice, will be the requirement to notify parents if a student there's a request by a student to identify as a gender that does not align with the student's biological sex. That's the one bullet point of this statute that is getting the most attention, I think. And so again, that's verbatim from the statute, but those are the two pieces of the statute that I think are getting the most attention. Is that fair?
And
Yeah, go ahead.
just so I'm clear too, like on the piece about notification of substantial changes to students, and on D,
Yep.
any request by a student to identify as a gender that does not align with the student's biological sex. The statute doesn't require us to say we will refuse to do that. What the statute does require us to say is that you can't hide that from parents. Is that right?
Can you ask that again? Definitely.
Well, let's say that there is a student and parent who support a trans student's identification with an alternative gender.
Sure.
There's nothing in the statute or in the policy that would prohibit CPS from doing what the parents are asking the school district to do.
Not in this statute. The other statute that was passed at the same time of this was the transgender bathroom, or the bathroom bill, and so that has some effect on how we accommodate our students who are transgender. This statute is just a notification.
It's a notification piece. Okay. Thank you. Other questions, comments? So the recommendation from you all is then we need to put this through, right? There's probably a date by which we need to do that.
Well, we have made it as an effective date of July 1.
So it could be either of the next two board meetings.
That's right.
Is fine.
That's right.
Yeah. Phyllis, would you just get with Kareem on where this ought to go? And I think this one definitely gets listed on its own. Not part of the consent agenda, and we'll work through it. Anything else on first bullet under section 2? Let's go to the second bullet.
Great. Second, glad to be joined this morning by our treasurer, Mike Guston, as well. This comes from the Finance Committee, and I'm glad to present it, or you can. Straight from the Finance Committee.
Yeah, so this is the student fees, fines, and charges policy. So the big change, I think, is for the current school year, or the just ended school year, I guess. The district, we did not charge base student fees. So those are assessed for every kid based on their grade level. I think it's $28 to $40, depending where you're at. The decision was made not to do that last time, but it was a 1-year exemption. And so coming back to the policy committee to either make that exemption permanent, which is how the proposed policy is written. So this would not preclude schools from charging fees for other things, like some schools have class fees, Montessori schools do intercessions. There are like lost item fines and fees that get us. So none of those things apply. These are just the base kind of every student gets a school fee. And so, yeah, the proposal is to make that permanent.
I just would like to add that I know I was part of the policy committee when we initially, brought that in, and I would like to keep it still the same. I would like to make that permanent. I'm not sure what my other board members feel like, but I would like to keep it as is.
So yes, I am in favor of keeping it as is as well. I am just curious with these base fees. I guess what was this fee contributing to? Was it like a part of the general fund, or I'm just wanting to get an idea of where these fees were being applied.
Yep. So all of that money goes into a special fund. It's Fund 9, which is called Uniform School Supplies. And it is, each school has an account in there. And so then that schools could use that to buy, basically they would get the revenue in, then they would use that to buy supplies for schools.
Okay.
As you can imagine, quite a difference in revenue between schools. You know, some schools bring in quite a bit, some schools bring in almost nothing.
Mm.
So, but that money's out there, it's spent. Yeah, some schools do it. The other things in that fund, like schools can do like a bookstore, and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of a separate pot of money that goes in there
Mhm.
as well.
So ultimately, the schools would then find I guess, an additional means of revenue to
Mhm.
support their specific schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, like a lot of the work on this is just waiving fees. I mean, schools and our department spend
Yeah.
a ton of time just waiving fees for students who have a financial hardship.
Okay. Okay.
I have a couple questions. And I think at the end of the day, would want to support, I think, whatever the recommendation is from the treasurer's office. But just from my own understanding, how much money total comes in a normal year where we do collect school fees?
We looked at this, I think we looked at this for finance. The numbers are around, I think, $350,000 across the entire district.
$350,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Fully loaded average FTE within the last board presentation was something like 72,000, 73,000.
Mhm.
So how many, if you, my math is not that great, it's going to be 4 or 5, right? Probably 4 or 5 FTEs.
Probably for 350 divided by 72. Where's our math?
Um,
Yeah, it's
I think
about 5 FTEs.
about 5 FTEs.
Mhm.
Okay. I think, and I'm not saying therefore one thing or therefore another,
Yes.
but we are in a context where we're looking at a RIF. This is revenue we're choosing not to collect.
Just to be clear, you couldn't use this revenue for FTEs.
I understand, but the schools are still going to need supplies. And so we're going to pull that money from a general fund, and the general fund money could be used for FTEs.
True. And I will say part of the budgeting process is every school gets an allocation from general fund. Because again, the collections for any individual school aren't, a lot of schools collect virtually nothing. And so in order to have some level of equity, every school gets a per pupil general fund supply amount.
Yeah.
That's just and this is kind of like on top of that. So.
Yeah. And it strikes me too, that I think there's something that feels deeply reasonable to me about the idea of not charging families who can't afford it, right? I think that just makes good sense for moral reasons and for financial ones. But some families can. I mean, you can imagine an alternative policy that doesn't waive them everywhere, but waives them in schools that have a certain poverty threshold or have a certain I'm kind of curious, did we look at that? Like whether we it's like need based or something.
Mhm. It would be at the student level. So you could certainly have schools where a few students would pay the fee, and you could have schools where only a few students would not pay the fee. We did not look at that. I think it's I mean that's sort of how the current policy works. The problem in implementation is the waiver process. Like people tend to only do it when it matters. So what happens is you have a lot of families who carry these fees for 13 years, get to graduation, and we go, hey, you owe us X hundred of dollars. And then we retroactively go back and assess, whether they would qualify for the waiver. And so we end up waiving just a huge amount of money.
And
At
could
the
you
end of the
give
year.
an estimate of what that amount of money is that's being waived? So if we said on average 350,000 is what
Mhm.
would be collected in a year, what's typically waived?
That's a good, I don't have that number.
Okay.
But I can tell you, like, when we did the conversion,
Mhm.
we found like $4+ million of money that we waived because the students are gone. It's just
Mm.
uncollectible debt. And a lot of this,
Mhm.
honestly, becomes uncollectible debt.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I just wanted
Ms.
to
Swinburne?
add, yeah, we did discuss that in terms of trying to figure out, should we charge, should we waive? And I think we just decided just to waive as just across the board, just to be, have it all be the same. So, yeah.
One final question with this. So I know that there was, I think in the year that it was established to waive the fees, there was a donor, right? That,
There was
I
only one donor who
one donor.
donated to one specific school.
okay,
So,
okay.
yes.
Well, again, is this something that the foundation could support?
That could be a possibility.
And there will be other fees. So I think that's a great suggestion. There are other fees that are programmatic. Some of our art classes
Mhm.
that are material intensive still charge those fees. So there would definitely be opportunities, for the foundation to support some of those things as well.
This is helpful, and I stand by what I said at the beginning that I would like to support whatever the recommendation is from the Treasury Department because you all have looked more closely at this than I have. I think it's just worth paying attention where we, as a board, like where we choose to really get into the weeds and where we don't, and there could be a version of a need-based waiver or something, but that might, be non-trivial. But I think you all have looked at this more carefully than I have. So then recommendation from policy would be that this go through the board. Yes.
Yes.
Do people I go either way, whether we try to put it in the consent agenda or list it separately?
I think it should be listed separately, just given the fact that we've had some.
This
very-
conversation? Yeah, that's fair.
The way, because I know we've just discussed it before, but it's fine, whatever.
So we'll list it. We'll list it separately, and Phyllis, you can get this to Kareem on which meeting. Does it matter to you, Mike, which meeting this goes through?
So, I mean, we just, obviously before August,
Right, before,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So either
There aren't that many meetings before August. There are only 3. So yeah, I got it. Okay. All right. That's good. So I think we're done with item 2. Anything else there? Great. Okay. House Bill 208.
So this is want to give you some context on this bill. This is also a statute that was recently passed by the Ohio General Assembly, but may require more discussion than our earlier one. This is not a required policy for the board to adopt. We have drafted it again, sort of verbatim according to the statute. We discussed this a few times in policy committee already. This is the new statute that enables school districts to adopt a new policy that would allow for the expulsion of students for actions that pose an imminent or severe danger to the health and safety of other students or school employees. We've Assistant General Counsel Scott and I have brought this to the discipline committee and spoken with them about it several times. And I'd say there's some mixed feelings from the discipline committee about whether they would recommend the board adopt this policy or not. Just to walk you through it very quickly, again, it allows for successive 180-day expulsions, or first a 180-day and then successive 90-day removals from school for students who pose this imminent and severe endangerment in the view of the superintendent. That's specifically defined as only these 4 categories. So it is limited. It's bringing a firearm or knife, committing an act that is a criminal offense when committed outside and results in serious physical harm or serious property damage, making a bomb threat. And then this last one, 4, is important: making an articulated or verbalized threat, including a hit list, threatening manifesto, or other social media posts that would reasonably lead a person to conclude that the student poses a serious threat. So it's important because that's not really part of the current statute allowing expulsions of students. There are 3 points of the policy that I think draw the most kind of discussion. One is there's a new requirement that this isn't a part of the current law relating to student expulsions, requiring the superintendent to communicate the conditions of return for the student, not only to the student and parents, but right to the Board of Education, which is fine. We don't have a process for that right now. You don't get a notice from us when, of the conditions that a student would be allowed to return to school, but we could work through that. Second, and this is really a concern that was raised most by our school psychologists, one of the conditions is an assessment by the student by a professional, psychiatrist, psychologist, or school psychologist, as to whether or not the student poses a continuing danger to the pupil's self or other students or school employees. And the concern raised by the school psychologist is that's to paraphrase, that's not really a thing. They assess students and they can, it'd be better if a school psychologist was explaining this to you, but they can't tell you for sure whether or not a student poses a continuing risk to other students or themselves. And I think it feels to them as though this is sort of setting up a professional, a psychologist, a school psychologist, that if should something happen in the future with this student, that we could all look back at them as having made the mistake of making the wrong assessment.
What's the liability insurance look like on?
That's right. So that feels wrong to them, and they sort of they have a problem with that. Third is a concern from the discipline committee generally about this no limit on the that these could potentially be a 180-day removal followed by a 90-day continuing 90-day removal where the student theoretically is never educated by or is not brought back to school ever. And our discipline committee consists of teachers, administrators, outside constituents like legal aid, and feels this has never been a statute before. So I think it's too early to tell what other school districts are going to do. We haven't seen removals. I think there are some boards that have adopted this policy, but we're not getting a lot of information about how it's being used yet. There are limits. Again, this is only specific situations. This isn't completely open-ended, but that sort of summarizes, I think, where the conversations we've had about this proposed policy so far.
Thank you. Questions? I have a couple, but I'm happy to go last. So just procedurally, the ask today is let's just have a discussion about this and give you all feedback.
There's
the
no
ask
requirement on this at all.
Okay.
So the board can act as soon or as it wants or not at all.
And this is all those masters. Just to make sure I heard you correctly, this is elective, so we could choose to do 0.
You could.
Okay. But what's here is what the administration's current recommend. Like but
I think we wrote it out so that you could see what the statute offers.
Yeah.
And then I included some red line to make sure that we were informing the board of some of the concerns that have been discussed so far. That's I don't know that. I mean,
who wants this?
This is just it's a new policy. I don't think there is an ask of the board yet. I think it's open for discussion at this point. Get some feedback. We're glad to take that back. If you want some feedback from other experts.
My take is there's plenty going on. If there's somebody who feels this is really important, I'm very happy to listen to it. But if there's nobody who's saying this is really, really important, we got other fish to fry. But I don't. What do you all think?
No, the highlights that you all identified, those were my actual concerns. I wholeheartedly agree that's a huge liability, right? For the school psychologist. And I also think that this can be rooted in a lot of bias and further inequities. And so as it reads, I'm not in favor for it. I mean, I think we all would say, yes, there should be consequences for these level of offenses, right? But we still want to make sure that we're honoring the restorative lens that we have. And so to Ben's point, I don't think that this is something that at the top of our priority list. If it comes back at a later time for discussion, that's okay. But again, it's elective and I'm not quite in favor of what I'm seeing at the moment.
And I would agree, we can come back to this at a later date.
That's fine. We wanted to make sure, it's a new law, it's been talked about a little bit. We wanted to make sure that we put something in front of you so that the
Yeah.
board, get some feedback. So that's fine. And if
Yeah, and that's sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
no, that's it. That's kind of our purpose
Yeah.
for bringing this
Yeah, we
forward.
had, there were several staff members who were aware of this and had brought it to, basically were asking for kind of guidance on if the school district was going to move forward.
Yeah.
So, and he felt like it was more of a district decision as opposed to us just determining it.
Yeah. And I first of all, thank you.
Mhm.
This is great.
Yes.
And I didn't mean to like that to have not said anything would have been to run the risk that some board member comes back later and says, well, why didn't you tell us about something that like,
Sure.
I get it. Thank you. And if there is a time where somebody really wants us to do like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on. We got 9142. Okay, so we're gonna I'll lose Kendra here in a minute. Is there anything you want to make sure we talk about today on the agenda?
So
That-
I do know that the next discussion, so policy 9142.
Yeah.
Was a point of discussion for me. And I may not be able to weigh in fully, but
Yeah.
at least wanted us to be able to bring it up.
Yeah, on this one, again, council can tell me if I'm or so sorry. This was Mrs.
Yeah,
Weinberg.
I'm gonna go ahead and just introduce it really quick if you don't mind. So we actually got a couple of different complaints. I had turned this in as a topic. We received a couple of emails from community members in the community and just wanted to really go over this particular policy 9142 and making sure that it's being carried out. Wanted to possibly discuss as a whole, as board members, and then provide any necessary steps to ensure that the policy is being followed per the LSDMC. So as I'm looking here at this particular policy, I highlighted a couple of points. And I just had this paper in front of me and then, okay, here it is. So obviously we all know what the LSDMC does, but I thought what was really good to kind of take note is the LSDMC shall approve, and this is at the bottom of the first page, any locally initiated change in the school program or focus. They may also make recommendations to the principal regarding other school issues. So when you look at the composition and the selection of members, this is key because the complaint is coming from two particular community individuals regarding two different schools. And if you look at number 5, it says that 3 community representatives who are not employed by the district should be chosen for your LSDMC. 1 to be selected by the Neighborhood Community Council, and the other 2 to be selected by the LSDMC. And in this particular case of the 2 individuals at the 2 different schools, they are stating that they weren't given an opportunity at all. And so wanted to bring that to the policy committee to further discuss. And I'm not sure if board member Matt had anything else to add to that.
I appreciate that, Mrs. Weinberg. I wanted to just I have a perspective on this, but we're about to lose Kendra. So is there anything you want to say first?
No, I think that you summarized this topic well based off the emails that we have received. So
Thank you. I think something to share is two things, at least 2 things feel important here to me. I think in the past, the purview of the policy committee, at least in the almost 6 years that I've been here, the purview of the policy committee has been to review existing policies and recommend potential changes or additions to the full board. What it hasn't been is a space to check to see in a specific instance whether or not a given policy has been followed if someone's concerned that it's not being followed. The second thing is true. I do think it's really important that there be a place to do that. Like the policies are not optional. Policies are directives the board has given the administration. And I think any concern that they're not being followed, I take real seriously. And I think we should take real seriously. I do think that's a concern for the whole board. And where we've done this in the past is in an executive session with the superintendent around employment of a public official. And so I think if there's good discussion to have today about what is in this policy, do we want to make changes to it? I'm all in. I think if it's like was there a breach that needs to get addressed? I absolutely think we should talk about that. I just want to do it on Monday with a full board and do it in executive session.
And I agree with you and kind of slightly disagree in terms of policy. It is our responsibility, obviously, to come up with the policy. And it's also our responsibility to make sure that it's being upheld correctly in terms of whether it's the wording or just the action. I do agree with you in terms of it being a full board discussion, but originally it was suggested to bring to policy since it was a policy issue. And I'm okay with them taking this and discussing it with our colleagues as well.
Grammy, I think, sorry, Kendra, were you gonna say something?
So in looking at the policy, I think the policy is clearly outlined. I don't think that there needs to be any changes or amendments to how the policy reads. So, per your suggestion of discussing it in executive session, to make sure that it is being upheld and carried out the correct way. I'm totally in favor of that. But I think one of the things that maybe Board Member Weinberg was wanting to ensure too was that we were interpreting the policy all in the same manner. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
correct. And just going over the exact wording and making sure that if it states that this is what is supposed to be done, that it is being done and not someone else or other individuals or groups, organizations interpreting in a totally different way. If it says this in the policy, then it should be followed what's stated in the policy. So we can discuss as a full board if you would
Well,
like.
I was going to say, just as a concrete next step, Phyllis, can I ask you to share with Kareem our request that we get this on exec for Monday? I have no idea how full or not full that queue is, but I'm going to make the request because I think I personally would like to make sure we talk about it. It seems like my colleagues do also. Anything else on 9142?
No, I think that was it, really. That was the huge concern. So
Okay. Okay. Makai and Zion, thanks for coming. Enjoy your summer. We'll see y'all next time. And we'll go on to, we have two that came from finance in section 4.
It's been addressed, 6152, we talked about already.
Yes. Sorry. Yep. Bye.
Bye, friend. See you guys. And I'll turn it over again to our assistant treasurer to talk about the proposed policy 6215.
Thank you, Dan. So just looking at this, so where this comes from, obviously, is there is some discussion about cash balances at school districts right now at the state budget, but we've been working on this policy for probably a year. So our kind of professional organization, ASBO, came out and said, school districts really need to have a cash balance policy. And so I think even when Ben was on finance, we started this, earlier last year. Just to put something in place and talk about what are best practices. So best practices, a district has a significant cash reserve, and our goal really is 60 days. Our goal is to have a 60-day cash reserve that gives us flexibility when unanticipated things arise. It allows us to kind of manage the ebb and flow of our funding. We get a lot of money when tax settlements happen and not a lot of money in the other months. And so it also helps us, maintain that. That's kind of the base of the policy as we look at, we would look at the 5-year forecast, see how many days of cash we have. If it's less than 60, then we create a plan to address that. So obviously we're not there. We're about 35, 36 days. So part of it is a phase in. And so the idea of the phase in is we would start with at least $500,000 this year. And then the board would agree on a number of years to phase in, and then we would work through subsequent budgets to get to that 60-day mark. There are a couple of things that I don't know. I think I know what I did. So I had some changes that I left in suggest, and so I think when we pulled this, you guys pulled what was current. So I don't have the most recent version. So I'm trying to figure out how to deal with that. Do we just push it for another month or?
Do you have a version we could look at together here?
Yeah.
We'll just save a month.
I do. Yeah.
You want to send it to Rob and Rob will get it up on the screen for us?
And I can share it with you guys as well, real quick.
The nice thing about Rob having it up is it'll be on the video for anybody who wants to watch it later.
Yeah. I'll just share it out real quick. And I'll kind of talk through the differences. There's only two. One of them comes directly from the state budget conversation. So the initial policy, you know, we have a thing, if it's under 60 days, what do? We had a lower limit, but we decided to put in a higher limit. So the idea is that if we got above 180 days cash balance, which would be a wonderful thing, or a lower limit established by law, then the treasurer and superintendent would prepare a plan to the board to reduce the cash balance in the manner it provides the most benefit to students while ensuring continued fiscal responsibility. Nothing really controversial there, just the idea of putting in an upper limit so that.
Can you just say again part that's new?
Part that's new is the bottom paragraph before phase in.
During 25-26 fiscal year.
No, go up, Rob. There's two parts that are new, man. Yeah, if they're projected. Above phase in, Rob. Sorry, friend. Yes. If the projected unencumbered balance is greater than 180 days or a lower limit established by law, the treasurer and superintendent will prepare and present a plan to the board to reduce the cash balance in a manner that provides the most benefit for students while ensuring continued fiscal stability.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath for when we get to that one.
I would say it would be very unlikely that would
Yeah.
ever be used. But it is
Good to know.
Yes. And then the phase in paragraph. Which is something that finance committees talked to, the second paragraph in phase in. 25-26, yes. Which is something we've talked about in budget, finance, and growth multiple times.
Thank you. Questions? I have a couple. I fully support this and would like us to do it. It's just a question of like, what's the best way to write the policy for it? Is there in that, so this is very specific to this fiscal year, which we're about to like etch in stone into our board policies. Would there be value in a version of that paragraph that says, like up until a time at which the district has a reserve of blank, by blank date each school year, the board needs to pass a resolution in a public meeting committing to the amount that they will contribute in that fiscal year. My thought is just like that it could live on. I think this problem is going to exist longer than just this school year. So we're going to have to do this again in a year anyway. And I like the idea of policies that require public votes by dates certain, because it forces us to be public about these things. But I don't know, like you all have thought more about this than I have.
Like I don't think the finance committee was quite there to put a date certain in. I do think it is a conversation once we get through this budget. It is a board conversation, and especially as we're looking at, new money for future years, as we're looking at to add into what does that time frame look like? Like if we say we want to get there in 5 years, that's X amount of dollars. If we say we want to get there in 7 years, that's X amount of dollars. If we say we want to get there in 2 years, that's a lot more dollars. But it really ties into the conversation about future levies, future growth, and those sort of things. So that's kind of where I think where our office and where the finance committee envisioned it as part of the conversation about what do we do for new money and new levies going forward.
I mean, if this is what you all want, I'm going to vote for it because it's like pushing us in a good direction, and good is better than zero. It seems to me like requiring us on an annual basis to ratify a plan for how we're building our reserve and thinking beyond just this next fiscal year would be better. But if it's not what you all want, like you're the expert, and I'm happy to vote for this.
Yeah, I think like this is the next step. So it's like do this step and we can always come back and revisit.
Right.
But it's hard enough, I think, to talk about reserves in our current budget conversation. So like this is a big step forward, because generally the first thing that goes away. And when you have budget difficulties or any sort of reserves, right? And so this at least puts, and I think that was the conversation. This puts a stake in the ground. This says we're putting a stake in the ground for this year and we're committing to moving forward.
That's great. Thank you.
I
Anything?
have no questions. Only comment is I think it's fine.
So I think this certainly gets listed on its own. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Phyllis, is that good? Make sense? Any questions? Good. Okay. Moving along. So topics submitted by board members. I think Phyllis, I might ask for your help with some of these because I think I really appreciate you collecting these from folks. Is the immigration policies request new? Because we did talk about that in the fall.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about that one before.
But she sent it subsequent to the prompt last week.
And I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I do have one question.
Please.
I know you said that we could either get to these a little later. The only one that I feel like would have an importance as of right now, and I do recall Vice President Bolton bringing this up because we have our middle schools coming up. So the review of the building naming or renaming process and policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be open to discussing that one and then tabling the others if there's not a need to immediately talk about it today.
Okay. So I think what we'll do then is no policy committee meeting in July because of the summer. But we've got June, August, September, October, November, December. We got 6 meetings left this year. So we have an open calendar, friends, if anybody wants to suggest any other policies for us to look at. But Phyllis, could you maybe for our next meeting create a schedule that just takes up I think maybe the first of the first Moffett one, and then you're saying, Mrs. Weinberg, we do the first Bolton one today.
Yes, because that
Yeah.
would be required.
And then let's just
Get
do
started.
the 2 Moffett ones in June. And then the last Bolton one. Well, that's so timely though. Let's just put the 2 Moffett ones in June so that I can learn more about what specifically she wanted us to chat about, unless council knows. Okay. So rather than guess, we'll ask. But then I think we should do the last 2 bullets today. And then we can ask everybody again when we come back from summer and see what else let's talk about. So, and then Dan and Stephanie, are you in a spot where you could talk about building naming or renaming today, and without putting you on the spot?
Glad to talk about it. We don't have any suggested changes, but I'm glad to discuss kind of the policy.
Did you have some questions you wanted to leave
No, I
with?
just wanted to add that I actually brought this up as well. I know when we brought in discussion of middle school names or the schools that we are currently changing, I just wanted to make sure that we were following the policy and that we actually come up with the name as the Board of Education. So I know the superintendent turned in some names to us, and then obviously we will have to discuss those. But I wanted to make sure that the policy would be followed as well. If you see in Section C, request for naming school facilities shall include obviously recommendations from the LSDMC, the community, and public-private partnerships, et cetera. But I do know it does not say anything in there currently of a school that is already established, but just slightly changing their programming. So I do still think that this still does apply for that as well.
So I don't know if you want a response from us.
I didn't need a response. I think Board Member Bolton, I'm not exactly sure exactly what she wanted with this. I'm just saying that I know moving forward, we have a list of names. I just want to make sure that we're following the policy as a full board at our next board meeting when that does come up as a discussion, whether we're voting on those names, et cetera. Just making sure the policy is being followed.
Thank you. I can certainly think it's very helpful to read this here because I can remember in past years, I don't know where this idea that like the policy committee has to like look at names for, but there's nothing in here, right, about the policy committee playing a role
No.
in any of
It's
this.
sometimes been assigned to the policy
It just
committee.
was
but-
assigned.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm guilty. Like, I think I was on policy committee when we looked at
It's
that.
just because it's policy, and then we then bring it back to the full board. But I think it should just go through the full board.
Yeah, there's
and
not,
just
there's
if anything
nothing in here
changes,
that says we should make recommendations,
Right.
nothing in here that says we should screen or whatever.
It's just the full
Um,
board does it. So,
Yeah, and the buildings that need to be named at the moment, this is Bramble? Or is there,
The middle schools.
So.
oh, yeah.
that I'm
I got
referring
it.
to,
I
the
got
middle schools that we're currently going to be starting in August.
I'll just say from our position, like it has always been the absolute purview of the board to name
Mhm.
schools. So even when requests like that come to us, we kind of say, we direct them almost to the board office to say, that's really outside of our purview. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we're getting requests, like at least in the context of Bramble, some folks from Madisonville have reached out
Nice.
to Eve and to me. I directed them back to Kareem. And you know, like I feel very similarly to how I felt about the LSDMC thing. Like, I just want it to be clear what the process is and that we follow it. And so I think it's like we send this to Kareem, which is like, hey, you know,
Absolutely.
anything that's going to be renamed needs to get on a full board
On
agenda.
the agenda, and then we all discuss it
And we talk
vote on
about it. And
I agree.
Great.
any other problems to solve here? Nope. Okay. So then, I have a feeling that the reason that Eve put the reduction of staff for financial reasons here is just because it's timely. And I think that we saw at the last full board meeting that we're going to just adjust our volume for a second. Thanks, Dan. You know, absent some unknown new source of revenue, it seems like the only way to get to a balanced budget, unless I'm missing something based on the last presentation from the administration, would involve some number to be determined, but like some number of reduced positions. And so this was, I think, I don't know why Eve wanted us to talk about this, but Dan, in case, so that we can go back and say that we did,
Sure.
do you want to go through like what the process is?
Sure. And this hard thing to talk about, but timely. The only board policy that directly relates to RIFs or reductions in force is 1540. And that's because the law permits the board to develop a policy that governs administrative, that would be mostly CAS, non-renewals of employees, excuse me, not non-renewals, suspensions of contracts, which is another way of saying an administrative reduction in force. Now, more than 10 years ago, the administration worked with CAS to come up with this policy, which defines for the board the reasons for which a RIF may be taken of administrators, including the financial conditions of the district, and then sets out a few parameters or protections for employees, including that they would receive notice 15 days before the board acts, and that they'd be paid out at least, I believe it's 30 days after the board acts. So this policy also calls for a recall rights. In other words, if the district then reopens the position from which an administrator was RIFed, they have the right to return to that same position within 2 years. So a reduction in force is not about misconduct. It's not about performance. It's about these kind of reasons where there's a need to reduce the number of positions. When the district undertakes that kind of a process, the first is to determine what positions are eliminated, and then determine if there are more people currently working in those positions, then we'll have positions next year to go through a process, including seniority, but also for administrators, including what the needs of the district are, to determine who are actually the people who are going to be let go. And if once those people are identified, then there's those protections kick in. They get notice 15 days ahead of time, the board acts, and they get paid out 30 days afterwards. That's for administrators. The collective bargaining agreement governs for most of our other bargaining units. So CFT has a whole section in its collective bargaining agreement. It's a similar process, sort of further defines the order in which individuals would be selected for a RIF. So part-time teachers are selected first, substitute teachers are selected first. And it goes through an order that includes, kind of re-employed retirees, part-time, all the way to a full-time contract teacher. For the other bargaining units, it's a combination of their collective bargaining agreement, their contract, and civil service law that determines the order within which folks are RIFed. So there's no board policies for the other groups because either their CBA or civil service law defines and governs in those cases. That was kind of a scattered presentation. I'm glad to answer any questions. There's not, from our standpoint, a need for any sort of revisions to board policy, but wanted to make sure you were aware what was out there.
Thank you, Dan. Questions? I have one. It strikes me as interesting that the RIF process for teachers is in the CBA and the RIF process for administrators is in policy. Is there a reason that they're in different places?
The Ohio revised code gives the board the ability to put in place an a policy for the suspension of administrative contracts.
Is it also in their contract?
There's no reference to it. It's governed. The law gives the board that authority for administrators.
I got it.
The board gives
I got it. It's almost like it's not a subject that can be bargained under state law.
But
the
our
board
position.
can
That's
pass it.
right.
I got it. Okay. Thank you for reviewing that policy. I think we're on to item 6, which is our standing policy review cycle.
Yeah, and so we looked at, we want to make sure we're starting to get through our 3-year kind of review of policies again. And unless the board disagrees, I think the policies that have been reviewed least recently, the policies that haven't been reviewed in the longest period of time are the 5,000 series, which relate to students. So there's lots of good policies to review within this chapter of policies. And the first set relate to really our enrollment policies. We put those up first, 4 different policies that relate to how students are enrolled in school. I think the last time there was serious review of these policies, former board member Hoffman was very involved in trying to really nail down what priorities we were going to set for how students are enrolled. Obviously preferring resident students over non-resident students, but also sibling priority. And she did a lot of work on kind of organizing the board around how we were going to prioritize student enrollment, particularly when we had first implemented a lottery enrollment for our magnet schools. So those things kind of came around the same time. We actually got some, after putting these up on board docs, we got some additional recommendations from the superintendent and Office of Customer Care about a few changes that they are recommending. And so, I can just give you a general overview of those, but we'd like to bring these back with a red line with some of their recommended changes if the board agrees to that or the committee agrees to that.
I was gonna say I didn't see any recommended changes to any of them. So
They're-
like that's good.
So just quickly kind of summarizing what they had, some of the options that are described, including like Paideia, are no longer being offered in the district. The superintendent shared with me that rather than referring to our process as a lottery process, we prefer to refer to it as a school selection process. We certainly still want these priorities to be included, and there's no recommendation to change the priorities unless the board gives us feedback that they want to change. But where a family has a need or a strong request to get into a school, we do our best to try to accommodate that. And as our neighborhood schools have become, more robust, I think, and more popular, we've been able to do that a lot more with families than, just a straight kind of lottery we don't like referring it as a lottery process. So priorities, we would recommend remaining the same, but changing the language of the policy to talk about a selection process rather than a lottery process. There's a number of other kind of just items she asked us to look at, but those are kind of the major changes you can expect to see in a red line next month.
I'd be really interested in that lottery conversation.
Okay.
You know, like I just, did you want to go first, Mrs. Weinberg?
No, I would just be interested to hear the further additions, and I can wait until next month for those.
Yeah, and I'd love for her to be there to talk more.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like I think, and I can open to ideas. And there's something that I think was important about calling it a lottery when it happened, because it used to be like a first come first serve camp out.
That's how we switched you. That's
yeah.
right.
And so I just it'd be interesting, good conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think she'd welcome it. It's really about trying to make sure the district is welcoming to
Mhm.
families and she not trying to get around the priorities, but
Yeah.
we often have room for families and can make room for families.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also I'm really interested in the conversation about interdistrict enrollment. Were you going there next? I
No,
didn't want to.
glad to.
We're just I'm glad actually that Mike is here. I think interdistrict enrollment is really bad financially because we don't get any of the property taxes from the district that those kids come from. So like it pulls our revenue per kid down every time we enroll a student from out of district because we get their state money, but we don't get their local property tax money. And so I think the idea, I'd love to just have a conversation about if people think this is better jurisdictionally in a finance committee discussion rather than ours, I would respect that. But just that there's this is I've always kind of scratched my head about why we do this, and would welcome a conversation about that.
I would just like to add, I actually don't mind that we open our schools up. And I know according to the state law, there's something that states that we are required to by a certain mileage or something. Is it something? I don't remember the exact.
We can look
policy.
at it for next, but it used to be, it was the board's option. You could
Mhm.
either be a completely closed district.
And we
Yes, so
Yep.
being open, but yes, that was the word I was looking for, being an open enrolled district. And I think
Then I
according.
think there were two options for open enrollment too. There's open to tuition payers.
Mhm. And then if they're outside, but
Yeah.
I would be okay with that, but also just also having that as a group, a whole
Yeah.
discussion.
Glad
as
to
well.
do it.
But yeah.
and I think there are plenty of districts where we accept their students and they do not accept ours, and I think that's bonkers.
They've changed.
Um,
Some of them have changed. They're now all open. Most of them are open.
Do all of them take CPS kids?
Most of them are open that I know of recently.
Yeah, I just this is what I want us to talk about it. Like, because if I live in Carthage, can I enroll in Wyoming? My hunch is no.
Probably not
But maybe
Wyoming, but there
maybe
are-
I'm wrong.
Yes,
But if you're in
there are other
Wyoming,
districts.
yeah, like I think it
Yeah, like Princess
feels
has open enrollment.
um,
Woods has open enrollment. There's others. Oh yeah.
yeah.
We can do a list actually.
And
too, if you'd like.
could you put the economically disadvantaged numbers next to the school districts for like who accepts CPS kids and who does not? I'm testing my hypothesis and I might be wrong. But anyway, like it would be good.
The East and West, I think,
Yeah.
are open enrollment now. So yeah. But okay.
But I think from a process standpoint, like I don't want committee creep, like I think a big part of my concern about this is financial. And do people have a perspective on whether this is a better fit for this committee versus the finance one?
They can go to finance.
Finance has a lot they're doing, like a pretty full queue. What? No, it's a question. Like I keep looking at Mike. Like, do you have a perspective on this?
I don't know. I mean, you're right. I mean, for every student, we get the incremental amount of the state share.
We get all of the costs associated with that student and part of the revenue associated with the student.
We do. We get the state revenue. I mean, our property tax revenue is going to be the same regardless of the number of students we enroll. depending on what the student does, the state share might be a little higher, we get a little more for students with disabilities, we get a little more for some of the career tech stuff.
I doubt it's as much as what their
But no,
local.
absolutely. There is no scenario where the state share makes up for what it costs for us to educate a student.
Yeah.
Right. Now, but then you get into, capacity and diminishing returns and, if you have a first grade class with 17 kids, that 18th kid isn't really adding a lot to your cost, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you hit the magic kid where you have to have a new teacher,
Right, that's a
so
different
there's,
story.
Yeah.
there's a lot of mathematical models to that.
Yeah. Well, what if like there's enough biggest stuff going on right now that like this does not need to be like what if we said we have kind of a light list of topics that have come in from other board members? What if we said at our August policy committee meeting, or Mike, if you'd rather do it in September, we could figure out like some data to share or something. I'm trying to find a time this calendar year when it would be minimally disruptive for you and everything going on in the treasurer's office to look at some of this together. Is there a time of year that would be better for you?
September, October.
October, November.
That's what I was gonna say.
November are like.
Let's do it in October. Seriously, like there's not like I don't. Let's do it well. I don't think we're in a rush on any of this stuff, are we? So we'll say October. Okay, great. Anything else on this? Sorry, Phyllis. Go ahead. Policy with a presentation from our incoming treasurer.
Part of that conversation also relates to our own employees who live out of district. That's a part of.
Yeah, and I should say too, like that
It's a little bit of a different kind
totally,
of,
but I can see a different reason why we'd want to do that. And given the size of that group,
and the board is allowed to take a different position with respect to its own employees
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
But yeah,
Which we
just
should.
an important part of the conversation.
yeah, for the records, watching this video later, I support that.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating that end. And it may not matter, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway. Anything you were going to say on this one?
This isn't on there, but I have this paper. Do we need this?
Use of district facilities.
Like do you have this paper? And I'm like, I don't see it on here. Were we supposed to talk about this?
Yeah. Was there a reason, Dan or Stephanie, 7510?
Yeah.
We have a hard copy of that. Is that something that was in the queue for today?
I believe it still relates to the, did that get taken off the agenda? It was on, I think, an earlier version of the agenda based on the discussion about the alcohol waiver.
Oh, I think we already discussed that as a full board, didn't we?
I don't have anything on that topic.
Yeah,
You
I
have
don't
anything on
either.
that topic?
Withdrawn.
Okay, yeah, we already
Okay.
talked about that.
Great. I'm
Okay.
open.
I was
I'm
a little
open.
confused.
The only addition on that policy I forgot also is it still says that alcohol waivers go to the,
Oh, that's what it was.
policy.
We wanted to discuss that in terms of can that just come to the full board?
Do you have
Since it's a
75?
full
No.
board decision. You know how they call in and ask us for it and then.
Yeah,
It goes to it says it goes to the partnership and public engagement. I think it goes to policy and
So it
equity
does go
first.
straight to policy and then we bring it to the full board.
That's how.
But I
we've
think we
been
had a
doing it.
discussion.
yeah, this feels like a really good use of committee space, like whether it be policy committee or some other committee, but just that people can make their presentation,
Right.
ask any questions. Our meetings are too long in our full board meetings, and I don't want to add anything else.
No,
that
I don't either.
Okay.
No, that's fine for it to still come here, but then we have to then obviously put it onto the agenda to say, hey,
Yeah.
this needs to be
Yeah.
voted on. But yeah.
Okay, so no recommended changes there. Is that?
Oh, yeah, it's.
No,
Weekly says that it goes to the partnership and public engagement.
So it just needs to
So
be changed to
we would
policy and
update
equity.
it to say policy and equity.
That
committee.
red line you see.
Have we been doing this wrong for years?
I mean.
Ever since I've been on the board, that's how we've done it.
I thought it was updated. I'm surprised.
We should fix that. Yeah,
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
just put it
fix
through
that.
that's like a no
Yeah, I
concerns
thought
there,
it
right?
was. Yeah.
Okay,
Got it.
all right. So we've got a nice set of things queued up to bring back to the board in the coming months. Rob, would you like to give hearing of the public instructions?
Thank you. If you'd like to speak during the hearing in public session, please click the hand icon. We'll ask you your name and school association, and we'll invite you to speak for 2 minutes at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
So maybe we'll go to hit any other business here before we see if anybody's signed up to hearing public. Mrs. Weinberg, anything you have under other business?
I don't have anything under other business. I think we discussed everything that I had a concern with. And did we find out, do we have anybody online for calls? Do we have any?
We have not asked yet.
Okay.
I do have one item of new business that I wanted to just tee up for a future conversation. I would like to explore with this committee in the coming months. Again, none of this is time sensitive. What it would look like to have a designated spot at hearing of the public for a parent representative who has unlimited time. I understand we have this tradition of giving the head of the teachers union unlimited time at the mic. I understand that's also a little different from what the contract says, but it's a tradition that has evolved over time. I'm not arguing that we stop doing that. But I think if one group is going to have unlimited time at hearing of the public, I would really love to see parents. And I understand how you can't do that for every single parent in the district. But could there be a delegate from the heads of the PTOs, or like each LSDMC has a parent rep? Could there be like a rotation whereby there's always a spot for somebody who's a parent rep on an LSDMC who can speak at the mic for as long as they want? I really am open to how we would do it, but I would like to advocate that we reflect in the time spend that we give to hearing of the public how important families are as a stakeholder group for the school board. And I think we could talk about this. I think, it's not urgent. Like we could do this in June, we could do this in August, we could do this whenever. Part of the reason I wanted to bring it up was I did want to ask Stephanie and Dan if could be an intern project or however you wanted to do it, but just to figure out, like, are there districts out there who have anything like this? Who have like a regular way for a family representative to have equal share in the hearing of the public time in board meetings, or other creative ways of kind of honoring the same value. Yeah.
So this is where it gets a little tricky because I know, what are you titling it? Say it again. You said parent what?
Oh, I have no title.
Well, you
What was
just said
that?
something, but what did you just say? Parent what?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, whatever you
Parent
said.
voice,
Yeah,
parent
parent voice.
representative,
So
parent speaker.
most of the time at our hearing of public, we have a combination of whether it's community, parents, students, et cetera. And I mean, I'm unaware of any other district allowing a particular parent group to have more time. It's typical of, the 2 or the 3 minutes. I feel like it would get a little tricky unless you were very specific to say it's a school's LSDMC or it's a school PTO, and then it has to state within somewhere, because then other parents may say, well, I'm still a parent, I'm still important, why don't I get more time as well? So I think it's going to get a little tricky there unless we're very specific to those particular groups.
I think it's a legit challenge, and I'm coming to this, but I have no draft. I have no like proposal for like how
Yeah.
to do it. There's something that has felt not quite right to me, that there isn't also unlimited time for somebody who wants to speak on behalf of parents. And I think that that's a challenge. I can't speak for anybody else, but for while I'm here, I'd like to try to figure out a way to address that. I'm not, also, just in case people are watching this now or later, I'm not trying to limit anybody else's time. I'm not trying to end the tradition we have of the CFT president having unlimited time. What I'm trying to do is say, in addition, at least, I can't think of a more important stakeholder group than we have, than the parents and families of the kids who go to school here. And so the asymmetry there has been wearing on me for a while. And I'd like us, I personally would like to try to figure out, is there anything good in the world we could do there? So that was the reason I was bringing this up under other business, is I wanted to ask if there's any research in the coming weeks, months, that council's office could do about whether anybody has figured out a neat way to address this. Or if I'm saying something that is a non-starter for some reason, or there's a reason we shouldn't try, I'm also open to that. Any other new business? Rob, do we have any speakers tonight?
This person is going to be Nahamane Israel. Nahamani, you can go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Rob. Good to talk to you today.
Good morning,
I
my friend.
I have a question, and I've been trying to find out the answer to this question to no end. Students that are currently in grade seven were in grade seven the 24-25 school year, that are going to be transferred to the neighborhood, and I'll call them, for lack of a better word, pop-up schools, just as they weren't designed for the population that they're going to be serving in a few weeks. How do parents know what school their child was assigned to and what their alternatives or what their rights are, if they don't want their child to go to the neighborhood school, if they, what is the policy, or what is in place now for this transition? I think it's called the growth year. And that was my question. I don't know if that was a full 2 minutes.
That's it. Anything else you'd like to share during your 2 minutes? We'll make sure that a member of the administration, do we have your contact information?
Well, I will say that I am working with Cincinnati Children's, and we are working on a grant to help young people that have autism-specific IEPs, help them transition through high school and beyond as successfully as possible. So that transition happens at the 8th grade year, which means my population is going to be in a different place next year than it was last year. So, any help that we can get from the board level to identify and get those children the support that they deserve, because you can think how traumatic it is for a normal child to change schools in the 7th grade year. But if a child is neurodivergent, that shift could actually derail their education, I think, if it's not done in a supportive way. So we want to support that. But I would love to know kind of the decision. Is that zip code? Is that specialties? Is that career focus? I know South Avondale is in our catchment area, and they could not tell me as of last week what their career focus areas were going to be. And that's a little scary to me.
Thank you. That with the 2 minute warning. I just want to say thank you for your question. I think it is a very reasonable and important one. Do we have her contact information? And so we'll make sure that somebody who's going to get back to her.
Nahamani, can you share that in the chat, and then I will share it with the administration.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have concluded items 1 through 8. Any other last call for anything for the good of the order?
Just to make sure that we have the right direction on these 3 policies. The Parents' Bill of Rights is to move forward, not on the consent agenda. The student fees is to move forward, not on the consent agenda. And then the cash balance policy is to move forward. And I didn't get if that was consent or not. Not consent. I don't think there's a reason to have these on Monday's agendas, unless the committee disagrees. So we could get these on the second meeting in June. Is that all right?
Does it work for you, Mike?
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely weekend.